I want to thank all the excellencies for attending this invitation, and of course, all of you interested in knowing something more about my country. I'm going to talk about the Colombia's present and our relations with Canada, almost 70 years old. Let me tell you that Canada is a strategic partner of Colombia for several reasons. Let's start with the political. Most important, of course, is our shared commitment to freedom and democracy. You know that in Latin America, and Colombia is no exception, we still have significant challenges to strengthen our democratic institutions, reduce poverty levels, and increase opportunity for well-being and progress for all our citizens. In this sense, Canada has supported Colombia in implementing the peace agreement signed with the FARC 5 years ago. We have completed nearly a third of its commitments. We still have 10 years of continuous work to complete and execute what we lack. On another front, Canada has been working very hard to collaborate with the humanitarian crisis caused by the terrible government of Mr. Maduro in Venezuela, fully restore democracy in Venezuela, seeking to hold free and transparent elections in that country. The instability of Venezuela significantly affects Colombian stability, since both countries share a 2,000-kilometer border, and there are already nearly 2 million Venezuelans, migrants, living in Colombia. The solid economic relations that existed years ago have disappeared and transformed in. The last example was in February, when I was in Colombia accompanying the inauguration of a technological service center that Scotiabank set up in Bogota with a projected capacity of 4,000 jobs that will attend the service needs for its client in the entire continent. But as I mentioned before, dozens of Canadian companies already have a presence in Colombia in all sectors of the economy. According to Statistics Canada, in terms of exports, in 2021, we had the best year of our exports to Canada, growing more than 60% compared to 2020, and reaching more than $1 billion, which is the highest figure in our business history. Of this amount, 40% was given in energy mining products, 30% in coffee, and 30% in other products, mainly flowers. This economic and commercial dynamic has made many Colombians see Canada as a destination to develop professionally. In 2021, more than 7,000 Colombians obtained a visa to study in this great country. And last year, more than 5,000 Colombians got a work visa to meet the labor needs that Canada, the labor needs that arise today in Canada. We celebrate that a Colombian fintech company recently settled in Canada to provide its services. For the first time in history, a mining company of Colombian origin got listed on the Toronto Stock Exchange at the end of last year. In short, our relationship with Canada is bottomless and dynamic in every way. I think it is important to tell you how Colombia is emerging from the pandemic and what a post-pandemic Colombia will look like. In 2019, Colombia registered GDP growth close to 4%, 3% inflation rate, and unemployment rate around 11%. Due to President Duque's government reforms and investment incentives in 2019, we expected 2020 to be a better year. Unfortunately, the pandemic arrived, and like everyone else, these indicators were drastically affected in 2020. The GDP fell by 7%, and unemployment rose above 20% in some months. Faced with this dramatic social situation, the government of President Duque implemented a robust financial support plan for small and medium-sized businesses and the people most economically affected by the pandemic. As was obvious, all this unexpected spending hurt the fiscal situation of the central government, making it necessary to implement a tax reform that initially generated strong social protests. Those protests affected the entire national economic apparatus, but the government finally managed to get ahead with the support of political and business classes. After that moment, a new vaccination plan being excellently implemented, Colombia began a robust economic recovery, registering in 2021 a GDP growth close to 11%, inflation rate less than 6%, and unemployment level again close to 11%. In other words, in absolute terms, the Colombian economy in 2021 returned to the level it had in 2019, one of the best recoveries in our region. We still have financial issues attending. Nonetheless, we expect that in 2022, Colombia will continue to grow its GDP at good pace, driven both by external solid demand and for its main export products, and by strong consumption in the domestic market, which recovered faster than expected. Regarding the inflationary problems, the Colombian Central Bank was one of the first to react, and several months ago, it began to raise interest rates to control the increase in prices in time. And in summary, the Colombian economic apparatus is very vigorous, and the central government will have to prepare to reduce the additional debt generated by the pandemic. The main reason why Colombia is growing so well is due to the timely economic support provided by President Duque's government to both people and businesses most affected by the pandemic. It made it possible to maintain a large part of its business fabric. To a large extent, it kept the purchasing power of the people. For example, the housing market has recorded impressive figures for construction and sales in this sense. Similarly, large infrastructure projects maintain their pace of development. These two sectors of the economy, housing and infrastructure, have a considerable impact that spills over into other sectors, generating a lot of employment and household spending. Another critical element is having welcomed nearly 2 million Venezuelans. The Colombian government has been very generous, opening all the spaces so that these people can better integrate into Colombian society. It had also had a positive impact on internal consumption. A third factor has to do with high international coffee prices. Colombia has close to 500,000 families that produce coffee. And this increased purchasing power spills over much of the national territory. A fourth factor is a significant increase in remittances from Colombians living in other parts of the world. It also helped to maintain the purchasing and consumption capacity of Colombians. A fifth factor was the global rebound in the economy, which has caused Colombian exports to grow more than 30%. And in short, I would say that these are the main reasons why the Colombian economy has recovered so quickly from the ravages of the pandemic and presents such a positive perspective to grow its GDP more than 5% by 2022. In terms of foreign investment, there are three significant factors for which Colombia is attracting more investors every day. The first is the Colombian government's convincement of the importance of private initiative as a fast and efficient way to spread progress and well-being to all its citizens. There are many incentives already developed to attract foreign investment. A second factor has to do with the size of the Colombian population. Our country is the third most populous in Latin America after Brazil and Mexico, like Spain or South Korea. If you add dynamics of our economy, it makes Colombia a country with great potential. The third is its geographical location. Given the new global reality of the supply chain, Colombia, having access to both seas and its proximity to the Panama Canal, becomes a hub to produce and serve both the South American and North American markets. Did you know that the direct flights between Toronto and Bogota have the same 6 hours length as Toronto-Vancouver, but without the time zone difference? It makes Colombia very attractive for many people. Now, returning to the subject of investment incentives, in addition to the previous ones, I could say that since Colombia has signed several free trade agreements with many countries, this facilitates access to those markets for those who settle in Colombia. There are dozens of free zones in Colombia so that whoever wants to be present in our country to serve foreign countries has a reduction in tax rates, both for income and consumption. Additionally, if you have investments in renewable energies, environmental protection, technology and creativity, there are additional investments in lower taxes. Colombia recognizes that it is essential to rely on the private sector to make the energy transition that the world requires today to fight against climate change and enter the value chain of new technologies in our economy. For this reason, its arrival in Colombia is more than welcome. Now, going to our foreign relations in a regional and global context, as it was mentioned at the beginning, Colombia is a firm defender of individual freedoms and rights, democracy, and free trade between nations. We see with great concern not present these principles in some countries in our region. We favor the Organization of American States, continuing to make the most significant efforts to ensure all the American countries adjust to these principles. On the other hand, Colombia is part of the Pacific Alliance, together with Mexico, Chile, and Peru. It is the largest free trade market in Latin America, and we are working hard to deepen and expand it. Indeed, Ecuador will be entering this alliance in the coming months. With the United States, Colombia has maintained excellent relations throughout history. Our leading trading partner and a great political ally have always collaborated with Colombia's social and institutional development. Finally, tell you that Colombia is associate member of NATO. It ratifies our position of defender and promoter of individual freedoms and democracy in the concert of nations. Thanks.
Thank you, Ambassador. I would like to give the floor to Madame Chantal Labelle, Director of the Division of Global Affairs Canada.
Bonjour, buenos días, good morning. A little bit of Spanish. Quisiera expresar mi agradecimiento a Su Excelencia el Embajador Jorge Lordón por la invitación a hablar hoy aquí con ustedes. Su Excelencia tiene un super equipo comprometido en la embajada y hablo de verdad en nombre de todo mi equipo en asuntos globales. Es realmente un placer trabajar con todos ustedes. I've also the pleasure of speaking in the company of Marcos Pekel, a distinguished academic, prolific author, and professor of international affairs, and may I boast, a graduate of McGill University. Welcome, Professor Pekel. Finally, I would like to thank all those present here today from the Diplomatic Corps in Ottawa. Before I begin, I would like to acknowledge that today's event is taking place on the traditional, unceded, unsurrendered territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin people. We thank all the generations of Anishinaabe Algonquin people who have and continue to take care of this land. We're here to commemorate a significant milestone for Colombia's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, La Cancillería, celebrating 200 years of history. For any institution, this is quite unprecedented and a major achievement. For reference, Global Affairs Canada, that all of you know, dates back to 1909, just a short 8 decades later. L'an prochain, le Canada et la Colombie célébreront 70 ans de relations diplomatiques. Pour le Canada, la Colombie est un partenaire hors pair, des plus constructifs dans la région et à l'échelle internationale, avec qui nous partageons, comme a mentionné l'ambassadeur, un engagement envers des valeurs communes, telles que la démocratie, la diversité, l'ordre international fondé sur des règles et le multilatéralisme, mais aussi l'intégration économique inclusive et la lutte contre le changement climatique. Colombia has been a key partner in supporting democracy and denouncing its erosion in the region, notably in Nicaragua and Venezuela. In addition, the region has faced unprecedented levels of irregular migration driven by political and economic crisis. Canada and Colombia, along with our regional partners, continue working to address migration and its root causes, as well as alleviate the suffering of those that are forced to leave their homes. Most recently, Colombia and Canada have stood shoulder to shoulder with Ukraine following Russia's invasion, delivering humanitarian aid and holding Russia accountable for its action in bodies such as the United Nations and the Organization of American States. These are but a few of the areas where both of our countries find common cause and work together to find solutions to regional and global problems. Over recent years, our government, academic, commercial, social, and cultural ties have expanded like never before. As mentioned the ambassador, more than 7,000 Colombian students traveled to Canada in 2021 to pursue their studies, and we hope to welcome many more in coming years. For those who may not have known, and certainly I did not know this fact, Colombia is South America's #1 diaspora in Canada. Il y a, un petit peu de français à nouveau, il y a entre 90 000 et 120 000 Colombiens et Canadiens d'origine colombienne au Canada qui améliorent les communautés où ils vivent.
The territory of the countries of Latin America, the border, were the borders that were set up by the Spanish domination. So different as in Europe that you have the nation states, the state was born after the nation in a process that is still ongoing. In Latin America, there were territories that were set up, the borders were set up by the Spanish conquerors, virreinatos, the Viceroy of Nueva Granada, New Mexico, New Spain, Rio de la Plata. And the independence was in borders that were not really natural people inside those borders. And secondly, important to say that the indigenous peoples of Latin America, many were killed during the Spanish domination, many were not part of the independent process. They today are also, like say in Canada, the indigenous peoples are fighting for the righteous right to be a member of the nation. But the independence in Latin America was fought by descendants of the Spanish conquistadores that at some point decided that they no longer need Spain for anything, and they wanted to be independent, they wanted to create their own countries, they wanted to be independent. And so this unnatural process of you get a border, you get some people inside that border, then you have two main challenges. The first challenge is to build a nation, to build an identity. And the second is to build state institutions. You get a territory, you're independent one day, and then you have to start building from scratch. And that has been a very complicated process in most of Latin America, that we have civil wars, we have dictators, and we have 200 years of building up our current institutions, our current identity. And building identity is not an easy task. As I said, the indigenous peoples, and you mentioned that, indigenous people were left out completely of the independence process. In many cases, they were discriminated. They started discriminating the Spaniards when they, or most of them, or died or became slaves, or died from diseases that came from Europe, from Spain. So the identity of Latin America became, first of all, language. Spanish, which was spoken before 1492, but in Spanish became the lingua franca of the continent. Religion, the Catholic religion became also a main component of our national identity. The Catholic Church in most countries in Latin America was in charge of education, in charge of marriages, in charge of family life, was controlled by the church, which did not exist in Latin America before the Spaniards came. So it was, as I said, a very complicated process. And then you get a territory, it's a very intelligent man, James Monroe, who issued his famous doctrine, Monroe Doctrine. America for the Americans. Go and guess what that means. Does that mean that America is for the American people all over, or America is for the United States? And it is both. And sometimes America was for the United States, which at some points it was doing whatever it wanted in America, or American is for American people. So this Monroe Doctrine can be understood in two ways, and it's a two-edged sword. And it's still like that, I would say, although less. Colombia, then I will talk a bit about Colombia, all this building an identity as a nation, deciding what kind of state it's going to be in a country which has a very fragmented geography. Geography should always be an ally of you, and it has to be. Colombia is at the corner. Ambassador mentioned Colombia is at the corner of South America. We have the Atlantic Ocean and the Pacific Ocean. That should be a blessing. We have the Andean mountain, a rising Colombia splits into three chains and makes the geography of Colombia very complicated. So we're a country of regions that develop regional elites that always make complicated the governance of countries, that all in Latin America we could have adopted the parliamentarian system or the presidential system, and we chose the presidential system. All countries in Latin America have a presidential system. No one has a parliamentarian system, which I think in Americas, without the islands, probably Canada only a parliamentarian regime. And president regimes have difficulties because all the power rests on one person, in theory. So Colombia, the complicated geography made, for example, if a bread maker, somebody making bread, need to buy flour. In the Caribbean area, you could not buy flour from Bogota because it was difficult to get it from Bogota to Barranquilla, so you buy it from the United States, and that was the way we did. Colombia at the beginning was much bigger than now. It included Venezuela, it included Ecuador, it included Panama. The country was called Republic of Colombia, but we call it the Great Colombia, which includes all these countries that 10 years, 11 years after our independence split up and created their own countries, which is Venezuela and Ecuador became independent countries in 1830. So the first century of Colombia, century I don't mean 100 years, I mean a geopolitical century from the independence till the late 19th century, we're fighting civil wars, which happens all over Latin America. Civil wars were here, civil wars were there. As I said, building identity, building nation, and building a state, and some power groups want to be the ones on top of others. as James Monroe was the first recognizing Colombia independence in 1822, the main mission of the Foreign Affairs, which was founded in 1821, our Ministry of Foreign Affairs, was to get recognition of its independence from different countries. And there was a duality between the United States and Great Britain, and then the country split up, and after we lost Venezuela, we lost Ecuador, we spent the first century, as I said, fighting civil wars, deciding if the country is going to be a federal country or a centralist country. We have federal countries in Latin America, Brazil and Mexico, great example of federal republic in which the states have a lot of power. And Colombia was fighting whether to be a federal country or a centralist based in Bogota country. And that was not decided in debates, that was not decided in dialogue, it was decided by the power of the arms. We had civil wars during the first century of our existence. At the end of the civil wars, in 1886, Colombia became an extremely centralist country. Everything is based in Bogota, which was a problem because, as I said, we have regional elites because of the geographic composition. And geography, I want to say, has created regions of very different state of development. Nabel knows that in the Pacific area of Colombia is quite backward place. It's extremely pure development, and also the Pacific coast of Colombia, from the top to the bottom of our geography, most of the population are descendants of slaves, of African slaves that came to Colombia Colombia, the second country in Latin America most slaves. The first, Brazil, came to work in the sugar canes. In Colombia, they came to work in extracting gold from rivers, and thousands died. And this area of Colombia, the Pacific, is mostly populated by descendants of African slaves. And it's very badly developed, and it's one of our homework still to do, which Canada is helping. But we had, after independence, we have two, we call them próceres, two liberators of Colombia, our founders, our founding fathers. The first is Simón Bolívar, which is the founding father of most of South American countries. He was of Venezuelan origin. And our second founding father is General Santander. They never agree on anything. On anything they never agree. The nature of the country, the relationship between them was awful. They accuse each other of trying to kill me, and trying to kill me. At the end of the day, General Santander said something that has accompanied our history for 200 years. Weapons gave you independence, but only the law will give you freedom. So we became a very law-abiding country in which people are not law-abiding, but the country is. So we consider international law very important. Colombia has been working always under the premises of international law. So I want to talk about Colombia a little bit. Why makes Colombia different for most countries in Latin America, from all countries in Latin America? First, we never have a military coup. Although, sorry, we didn't have two military coups, but they were not coups. They were little coups that didn't have any meaning. We have always, our presidents have been elected. I would say that they were elected by, at the beginning, after the independence, only white males, owners of property that could read and write, will vote. And slowly, the vote was expanding, then only white males, even if they don't own property, they can vote. But that makes an history of every president in Colombia being elected. In 1957, we gave women the suffrage. This is one thing. It's the only Latin American country can say that we have always, presidents were elected. Secondly, Colombia has enjoyed, and the ambassador mentioned that, financial stability. We never in our history had debt crisis. We always pay our debt. We never in our history had runaway inflation. We never in our history have runaway devaluation of currency. We have a central bank which was founded in the beginning of the 20th century. We have macroeconomic stability, which is extremely important for Colombia. And third, it's important to say that we have always been close to international law, to multilateralism. Colombia is a country where participated in the first Pan-American conference was held in Washington, the idea of Latin America to become some kind of integration among the states. But we had one huge, big trauma, and that was in 1903. In 1903, we lost Panama. As President Theodore Roosevelt said, I took Panama. The question is if Panama was ever a territory of Colombia. No, we're not sure. Colombia and Panama are divided by a huge mountain range in which there's no road there. There's no way to get from Panama to Colombia by land, and it's going to walk on the jungle and be eaten by mosquitoes or by snakes. But we lost Panama in 1903. Which was a big trauma for, I think, one of the main features of Colombian foreign policy, we have to start talking about that now, was when we lost Panama. We lost Panama in 1903. As I say, I'm not sure Panama was ever part of Colombia, at least geographically it was, organic it was. The Americans built a railroad in 1848 without asking Colombia permission. They just set up the railroad. Because if you wanted to send something from New York to Los Angeles, you have to go to Panama. Cross taking off after we lost Panama. Taking off not only diplomatically with the United States, but also the coffee economy started to grow, very important. The elites of the country united after we lost Panama, because they started to think that the country is going to fall apart into different regions. And the elites, united for many years, created a united front to face the new reality. Not only we lost Panama, we had a civil war before, I don't want to get into that. And the country started to establish its mantra today as, first of all, coffee economy. It was the first exporting economy, and making it an economy that, as the ambassador said, would benefit the people who grow the coffee, not only the big traders. So the families, today 600,000 families, the ambassador made, was important. Secondly, that set up a relation between Colombia and the United States, which is quite important. Just one more number. In 1830, after the big crash in 1829 of the New York Stock Exchange, Colombia was the only one Latin American country that did serve his debt to American private banks. And that set up, of course, also our relation with the United States. I will jump forward and say, I will not be too long with this, that maybe, allegedly, the main event of Colombian foreign policy in 200 years of existence of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Madame Labelle, is when Colombia joined the Korean War. It was a decision made when, of course, North Korea invaded South Korea, and the United Nations established a an effort to liberate South Korea from the aggression, and the United States was commanding a joint flag force. And the United States decided that everybody wanted to be against aggression, but the United States decided that only will accept contributions that are complete battalions, not just 1 or 2 soldiers to have a flag. If you want to join the effort, you have to send a complete battalion, hundreds of soldiers, and Colombia joined. The only Latin American country that joined the Korean War effort was Colombia. 123 of our brethren died in Korea, and many are missing. And that set up a relation between Colombia and the United States, which still today, Colombia is the main ally of the United States in Latin America. We started receiving aid from the United States. We have a very special relation with South Korea. And that set up a line which one academic said Colombia has a very stable, a very coherent foreign policy with the United States. It started with the loss of Panama, in which one of our presidents said, "Respice polo" means we look to the north. After Korea and Colombia remained, Colombia was, after your prime minister set up the Blue Helmets, Lester Pearson, in 1956, the first mission of the Blue Helmets of the United Nations was in the Sinai, in the Suez, after the Suez crisis, in which Canada was leader of that, and Colombia sent the battalion that was in Korea to the Sinai, spent 2 years there from 1956 to 1958. Colombia sent peace forces, which is one of our identities. This relation with and then after Colombia, of course, is a country that has experienced a very complicated internal conflict from all kinds because of geography. We have more territory than state. That's a problem we still today having. We have areas of the country which were never controlled by the central government. So we started to be a country rife in all kinds of conflicts. Left-wing guerrillas started to spring up in the country in the early 60s. Then, of course, drug trafficking, cocaine, marijuana, and then paramilitary groups. And the country was always facing these different conflicts while advancing in institutional strength and the economy. We have one president who said, the country is doing bad, but the economy is doing well. And that more or less resumed what the situation for a long time. And facing all these difficulties of left-wing guerrillas that control some territory, paramilitary right-wing groups control some territory, all of them work with the drug traffickers, all of them benefited, and the drug traffickers were working with both, with the guerrillas or with the paramilitaries. The country was really facing a very complicated situation in terms of security, and then Uncle Sam to the help. And in year 2000, we started Plan Colombia, which was a very important military and social cooperation between the United States and Colombia in order to get Colombia out of the difficult situation, of the really complicated, almost failed state situation. But Plan Colombia was extremely important. Plan Colombia helped fighting all of these 3 categories of unlawful armed groups, the guerrillas, the paramilitaries, finally paramilitaries demobilized in the first decade of the century. Then the Plan Colombia paved the way for President Santos' peace agreement with the FARC, which is the oldest guerrilla movement in Latin America. And this to say that part of Colombia's foreign policy was always shaped by our internal difficulties, by our internal conflict. It's not only to Colombia, but being mired in all these difficulties, all these conflicts, all these wars, Colombia needed help. And help came. It came from the United States, it came from Great Britain, it came from other countries. And Colombia finally set up the field for our peace agreement, in which many countries, including Canada, are helping. Colombia sees itself as a country, as Ambassador said, as a Western country, whatever Western means today, as a Western country, a member of the countries that first of all support for democracy. We have been a democracy for 200 years, not perfect democracy, I don't know if such thing exists. We have been a country that favors free trade. Colombia has many free trade agreements. Colombia has free trade with South Korea, a free trade agreement with Israel, a free trade agreement with Canada, with the European Union, with the United States, with most of Latin American countries. We negotiate in a free trade agreement with the United Arab Emirates at this point. Colombia favors investment. Colombia favors market economy, and Colombia sees itself as a member of the Western world. As Ambassador mentioned, we're the only Latin American country member of NATO as an associate member. Item number 5 will not apply to Colombia in case of aggression, but nevertheless we have a great cooperation with NATO. Colombia was a founding member of the United Nations in signature of the San Francisco Charter. Colombia, the Organization of American States, was founded in Colombia, in Bogotá in 1948. Colombia really favors multilateralism. Colombia is a member of many multilateral organizations, even organizations to promote the Amazon, to preserve the Amazon basin, and others. And then 200 years of foreign affairs, just to end up here and answer any questions you may have. Colombia, foreign relations are based on trade and based of mutual respect, on respect of sovereignty. Colombia has expanded its foreign reach in the last years, opening new embassies in many countries that we had no before, also in Indonesia, for example, in Qatar, in the Arab Emirates. We have had relations with Nigeria for many, many years. Nigeria has an embassy in Colombia, Colombia has an embassy in Nigeria. Colombia sees its relations by case basis. You ask me if I would say, if Canada has relations with Latin America. Latin America does not exist as such. It is countries. We don't have block like the European Union. Latin America is quite non-integrated. We have never managed to integrate ourselves in any way or manner. We have 2 places, Latin America and the Caribbean has 2 places in the, 2 seats in the Security Council, but many times one country votes one way, another country votes the other way. Even we have Peru and Ecuador with neighboring countries, and they were together in the Security Council, voting different each time. So Latin America is different countries. So looking at Latin America as a bloc, if you are a diplomat sitting here or sitting in another place, it's not the right way. You have to look at each country, see what you can get from there, where you have your friends, where you have your interests, where you can sell your products. We don't have a free trade area in Latin America. We have a small free trades, Mercosur, Pacto Andino, CARICOM, but we don't have a big free trade area in Latin America. We don't have a multilateral organization that represents Latin America. We have the Organization of American States, in which the United States at the beginning was the boss. Canada finally and gratefully joined in 1990 to counterbalance a little bit the United States. But the United States today is not the United States of a few years ago, so it's less involved in foreign matters. So, dear friends, I will finish here saying that Colombia is a great country which faces, like most countries, a lot of challenges. But we have had, as the ambassador mentioned, impressive numbers. We really faced the pandemic. We were the first country in Latin America who vaccinated almost 70% of the population. We were very fast with the vaccines. We didn't start doing politics with the vaccines. The vaccines were from China, welcome. Vaccines from the United States, welcome. Vaccines from wherever. So we took all the vaccines that came and we applied to the population free of charge. Today we apply in fourth and fifth dose free of charge. The economy recovered thanks to the help that the government gave to business and people. And as I said, 2 million Venezuelan refugees in Colombia is a country of 50 million. Guess what percentage it is? We have to do it because Colombia established that Venezuelan residents are welcome, no matter who, no matter what, no matter how. The Constitutional Court in Colombia has approved a lot of rights for the Venezuelan refugees, and that's the way we are. I really thank you for the attention, and we'll be happy to answer any questions you might have. Thanks very much.
If you have any questions, any comments?
I think people are looking behind their back, so many on.
Yes, ambassadors?
The ambassador.
Can I, you want to share the microphone with you?
No.
Okay.
Thank you very much for your remarks.
How's it going?
I would like to thank the young brave Colombian soldiers during the Korean War who sacrificed their lives. How Colombian government is dealing with such kind of increasing instability of the international community for the future. That's my question. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. I think one thing we see now in foreign policy of most countries, including advanced countries, that the foreign policy is becoming more government country than state. And this is a phenomenon we're seeing everywhere. Some countries more, some countries less. But depending on the government, and I think the best example to this is Brazil. Itamaraty, Brazil foreign policy was taught as a state, but then came a president and changed everything. And I think that's happening everywhere. So this is one thing. And we have elections next Sunday. And certainly, depending on who wins, foreign policy will change. Things as state-based foreign policy maybe to protect the sovereignty and the borders, but today foreign policy is very politics, a lot of politics. What's the best way to advance by free trade or not having free trade, by again putting barriers to trade or not? And this is a question that governments will answer and not states don't being called the state. On the other hand, I think what we see the instability after the invasion of Ukraine, I think is breaking the world order completely. Look at the Security Council. The Security Council is paralyzed in the Syrian war. Since the Syrian war started in 2011, Security Council wouldn't have any meaningful resolution on any issue. Not in Syria, not in the pandemic, certainly not in Ukraine. So I think the world order is breaking. But I don't know what's coming on his to replace it. And that, we look at Latin America again with the race to Ukraine, and we don't have a unified position. Aggression today is not aggression. It used to be. But what Russia is doing for some countries is not aggression. It's defending itself, destroying all cities on the way from NATO expansion, which is a threat to national security of Russia. And some people believe that. Even if they don't believe it, they say it. And it became state policy of many countries. And I think that the Ukraine situation, the ambassador has created an ambiguity. Some countries are trying to find some equilibrium between having a moral posture and having his interest defended. And some countries don't find that equilibrium. Colombia has unequivocally condemned Russia, which in Latin America is not many countries. Some countries are fiddling to see what to do. So I think the world order is breaking. Trade barriers are coming up. Started with the pandemic, some countries started to ban export of masks or export of medical equipment. Vaccine became political in many places. So the answer is, I don't know. I don't know. I think I think that pandemic created a situation that everybody for himself. Even the European Union, when they blocked Italy, the Italians were dying on the streets, and the European Union was closing the border to Italy instead of helping his fellow member founder of the Steel and Coal Agreement. So that says a lot. It's the most integrated of continents. Europe started to raise trade barriers. I think the world order is breaking, Ambassador. We have to find the challenges, we have to find the opportunities and fight the threats. But what will come after this, with Russia isolated, with China also not sure what to do. China is not comfortable with Russian invasion, but has to support somehow. In terms of multilateralism, Ambassador, I think we're sliding to two bubbles. A bubble centered on China, in which dictators will find solace, and a bubble of Western democracies. We're trying to, I think the Ukraine really helped to strengthen the Western alliance. And so the multilateralism is breaking into two bubbles, and if a country is not a democracy, it needed to pay a price before. Today is no price to be paid, just go to the way, and very little price to be paid. And look at Venezuela. Maduro is still in government, and everybody who was fighting Maduro is laying on the ground. Even the Grupo de Lima, Ambassador, if you forgive me, didn't achieve his goal of returning democracy. So this two-bubble multilateralism, I think, is one of the consequences of the war. But it started before, it's not just because of the war. Thanks.
Yes, Ambassador. Ambassador. Thank you to us, Martin Hardy, New Zealand High Commissioner to Canada. Thank you for your presentation today. I learned a lot. In particular, the presence of Colombia in the Korean War. I was not aware that Colombia came to the assistance of Korea. Everything I think that's been said today underlined why New Zealand took a decision early part of the last decade to increase its relationship, to improve and strengthen its relationship with Colombia. And we finally opened a mission in Bogota about 5 years ago. And also we've been very encouraging of Colombia to build its trade relationships in the Asia-Pacific region. We worked hard to try to have a free trade agreement ourselves with Colombia. That didn't come to fruition, but we did join the process to become associated with the Pacific Alliance. And we're still working on that. So I would be interested in your perspectives on how Colombia proposes to finalize its, alongside the Pacific Alliance partners, to finalize your agreements with new members, but also associate members like New Zealand, Canada, and a little more broadly, the longer-term interest in the CPTPP, the comprehensive, progressive partnership in the Asia Pacific.
Thanks for your question, Ambassador. I think your country was the first one to be an observer member of Pacific Alliance. And I think we have some problem with New Zealand in regards to milk, no, Ambassador? Yeah. Well, there's always these problems arise. Colombia, in his quest to strengthen his trade agreements, his reach, his diplomatic reach, although New Zealand and also Australia would say we were so far that you didn't see him in the map. But it's extremely important country for us today. First of all, like-minded values, the defense of democracy, the climate environment, in which New Zealand has a lot to teach us on that. And the problem with free trade agreements is in our country, or I think most countries, not consensus about that. Difficult to find consensus in many areas today which relate to free trade. Colombia has expanded its relations with Southeast Asia. We opened our embassy in Thailand, we have an embassy in Vietnam, and in Indonesia, in Australia, of course. I'm very good friends with the Australian ambassador, and of course, New Zealand. As relate to trade, of course there are difficulties because of the distance. And most possibly in some areas they are competing economies. But we like ambassador that free trade agreements today are not based on products, they're based on other things, based on investment, based on joint ventures. And they're more important these areas today, the plain product exchange that always thought about free trade. We have a small rugby club in Colombia, which is your national sport, I would say, on longs, and we started to see rugby on TV, and the team, which is the best, sometimes they show the games on TV and people start to learn about it. They start to compare to American football, which is not the same. The blacks, and I hope that today in this interconnected world, in theory interconnected, but politically and geopolitically very fragmented, of course, the shared value that we have in the country will be set us in the same group. Well, it will be, Colombia has limited resources, but I think that the diplomatic sphere of Colombia will keep growing. As we said, we really have a very strong relation with India today. India became a big country for Colombia in terms of importing a lot of cars, for example, for India, from India. We see a lot of Indian people in Colombia now on the streets. So I think that we reach into an area which was not in our radar before, because of our own Latin America. And that includes all the countries like-minded in the Pacific. And of course, Korea has been a great help for us. Colombia has great relations with Japan. And hopefully we get a stronger relation with Pacific, which is, as I said, we share values. I'm not very much familiar with what's going on behind between your country and mine with negotiations of any kind. But hopefully, I would say many Colombians would like to live in that. As I say, we have one mission common. We're a very diverse country geographically. We are the country with most aves, they say aves.
Birds.
With most birds in the world, so bird watching is tourism attractive, and that you need clean air, you need clean water, you need clean jungle to do it. So this is a country also is great with environment protection. We also, that's it, Ambassador, I think I have a good cup of Colombian coffee. So yeah, okay.
Hola, Carolina Aguirre from Chin Radio, Ottawa. Thank you again for this invitation. I want to be really specific with my question. The three of you mentioned Venezuela. The upcoming elections are coming up on Sunday. On Monday, people from Colombians in el exterior going to be voting. Based on your experience and your knowledge, do you think if one of the candidates win, the future of Colombia will be similar to the future of Venezuela?
No.
With relation to our relation with Venezuela, which President Duque has not recognized Maduro government and is to recognize Juan Guaido, all candidates have said that will change course with relation to Venezuela. From the candidate from the right to the candidate from the left, they will change. They will see that will change course with relation to Venezuela. How far that change will go will depend on the candidate. That's for sure. Because as I said before, foreign policy today is the most government policy that state in many areas, certainly in this kind of very political charge situation. If the candidate of the left wins the election, we will have ballotage. The ballotage will be on June 19. We will have closer relation, but if I look at Chile, for example, as an example that Chile have a left-wing government has not came too close to Maduro, because Chile is a democracy, Colombia is a democracy. On the other hand, the relation between Colombia and Venezuela is extremely complicated. Venezuela is really a strategic area for insurgents and left-wing guerrillas fighting Colombia. They have a base in Venezuela. They are fighting from Venezuela. They resting in Venezuela. When they have to flee, they flee to Venezuela. So the election is extremely complicated. Drug trafficking from Colombia is going through Venezuela. Venezuelan military have been involved in drug trafficking. So the relationship, as I said, is very complicated. We have some border, which was always a very porous border. You might want to have all the police and military people who cross the border. So we need some areas in which cooperation is essential. Border, security, and drug trafficking. But also the position of the Venezuelan government vis-a-vis drug trafficking, I don't know what it is. Just let it go. I don't know the cooperation between American agencies and Venezuela, which is currently non-existent, at least on the surface, with the DEA, for example. So it is so complicated a matter that any government we have to really move very carefully, no matter who wins. Relation with Venezuela will be restored. Probably the new government, whoever wins, will, out of choice, recognize Maduro, set up some. We have millions of Colombians living in Venezuela. We need consulate there. So I think change will come, but as I said, it is not easy. It's an extremely complex situation between Colombia and Venezuela of all kinds. Even Colombia exports electricity to Venezuela, and a lot of exporters from Colombia got out of payments, and they still owe millions of dollars from Venezuela to Colombia because the government of Venezuela did not provide dollars to pay them. So as I say, we have a whole, if anybody in international relations, Professor Lederman, it is a really great case study, the relation with Colombia and Venezuela, and all the challenges that are there to face whatever government comes to Colombia.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you, Professor, and thank you all. If there are no more questions, we would like to thank you for attending this event, and with this we'll be closing. Thank you all. Thank you. Have a good day.